Hey, I'm Geoff Zanelli, and we're here to talk about what I've been up to recently, like Leo and 10 Lives and Star Citizen and whatever else Kaya thinks of to ask me.
Well, Geoff, it's so great to be here in person with you. I mean, this is for people who are watching. I have a Kaya cam now, so if people are watching at home, this has been the first in-person interview since before the pandemic. So,
And I think.
Yeah, I know, and to do it with who was my first interview ever on Film.Music.Media, which is fantastic. So, I mean,
Circle of life.
I know, circle of life. That was before I had a camera, before I did everything, and it was just me bothering you on Facebook to talk about the Pacific. That's what.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh right, that was it really? That was the first one. Okay.
Yeah.
The Pacific. I know we talked about pirates once.
Yeah, we talked about
pirates. We must have done this a few times.
We've done it.
I probably wore this shirt.
Yeah. We've done it plenty of times. So yeah, if you want to learn more about Geoff's old stuff, definitely go back into the Film.Music.Media archives. But to kick it off, I mean, I really want to just jump right into Leo, because Leo is such a fantastic film. Congratulations on such a beautiful, animated film, which is, I think, such a treat these days, because animation's going through some hard times, and but I think CGI feature films are still doing super well. So and it's, I mean, top the charts with Netflix, and your soundtrack is doing so well.
Thank you.
So I guess take me back to the beginning. How'd you get involved with this project?
Wow. It's sort of an old-fashioned story. I get a call from my agent. She says, "Hey, we're gonna have you write a demo if you're interested in this." It's an Adam Sandler and Rob Smigel wrote it, and I'm like, wait, these are my SNL heroes.
Right.
These are, I stayed up till 1 a.m. for those guys, right? And Rob Marianetti and Dave Wachenheim, those are the 3 directors, and Adam produced the movie.
Yeah.
They did TV Funhouse and like all of the animation that I was dying over on SNL in the 90s, and of course Adam was on-camera talent Okay, anyway, so that's an easy phone call to say, yes, I would like to write a demo for this thing. And they sent me, I watched the whole movie, but it was storyboards. So that's all, obviously that's how it works. It's not animated till the end.
Yeah.
And then they pulled out one scene, it's about 3 minutes, one of the Ms. Malkin scenes when the substitute teacher arrives, and said, can you just score that as a demo? And I said, sure, but there's another scene that I got pretty excited about, which is when Leo crawls across the wall, his first escape attempt. And I said, would you mind sending me that one, as a work tape as well? So those are the 2 scenes that I scored. And funny enough, I came to learn later, my take on Leo's first escape made Adam laugh.
Yeah.
He thought it was really funny what I did, and I think that was probably the main thing that tipped it over. It was like, okay, he gets the sensibility here, because it was totally ridiculous. And my take on the Malkin cue is largely what you hear in the movie. However, the escape sequence is radically different from what I initially wrote.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was funny, because once it got animated and it became, alive.
Yeah.
It looks different, it feels different, and it shifted around. It's still a comedic moment, but anyway, that's how I got involved in it. But funny enough, I wrote those demos, and because animation's such a long process, 4 or 5, maybe 6 months went by, and I didn't really hear anything. And I thought, well, I had a good meeting, I said the demo, but they must have moved in another direction. And then totally out of the blue, without another meeting, I just got a phone call going, you're it. Can you start? And I said, yeah, of course. So anyway, that was gosh, I mean, I guess as we were sitting here, it was probably about 2 years ago when I wrote the demo.
That makes sense. I mean, for a film like that,
Yeah. And then I remember pitching to them, because this is one of the things that I really firmly believe in animation, especially when it's a musical, like Leo is that the songs and the score need to work together as opposed to being like separate entities.
Right. So there's not that jarring shift over. So were the songs already in place on the animatics?
Largely.
With scratch dialogue and stuff like that? Or?
Yes, that's right. So the songs were written by a separate songwriting team, but I remember saying, look, you have 5 or 6 songs, or actually it's more than that, but they're all thematic and they're great songs. So if I come in and I write 10 more themes, you got a movie with,
it's too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
It's so instead, what the score has to do is kind of, wrap that all up into one kind of like music event.
Yeah.
Sometimes making allusions to the songs, and other times there are times when the score does have to be on its own action moments, or that escape cue that I'm talking about is a one-off or a two-off. It happens, he tries to escape a few times. But I guess what I mean is like it was not me coming in and going, okay, we need to plant a flag and just say like this is the score and these are the songs and never shall the two meet. Instead, I pitched to them the idea that it all worked together, because to me, the best, and it doesn't even have to be animated. Mary Poppins, Willy Wonka, The Lion King all come to mind as great score and song combinations, and that's what I really wanted this movie to feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, creating that weave of score and song, like, is there, I guess, and I mean, you've had experience, I think, working on stuff in the past. So, is there like a trick to getting into a song and then coming back out into score without being I guess, to make it seamless? Is there like a trick to making it seamless? Like,
well,
is there certain notes that you want to pick up from the first notes of the song to kind of?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, it's a great deal of what the work goes into. A great deal of work goes into making that kind of finessed, and because unless you're being ironic or you're trying to make a point of, and now we're going to sing, which can be a funny moment in a movie, I actually prefer that it feel as natural as possible.
Yeah.
It's part of the suspension of disbelief that we ask of our audience, is to just believe in this world. And this is a world where the fifth graders sing a song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that they sing their feelings, or or the drone has a song, or whatever. And so these are, this is where a lot of the work went. How do I get into and out of the songs and have it feel like, a little more like waves on an ocean, very natural kind of ins and outs. And when are there moments when I can quote the songs and use it as score? Like you see it with some. I mean, you'll see it when you watch the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when they were, I guess when you got the job and you had those first conversations, it seems like Adam was responding to how you made a scene really come to life, kind of being comical and stuff like that. And I'm curious, with animation, what I love about animation is you can get big, you can get silly, you can get, but you can also, I love that Leo also has a lot of heart and a lot of, emotion to it. So I'm curious, is there a trick of being, I guess, comical without being, I guess, too over the top? And is there a way to be sentimental and emotional without being too schmaltzy? And because I think certain animation, there needs to be a balance where you have to hit it just right and not go too much, and you kind of straddle that line where it can be a little bit melodramatic or kind of, soft and warm, but not too, So I'm curious, was there a challenge for you on Leo?
It's so true. You have to find the line. Sometimes you have to find the line by crossing it, pulling back. But I mean, you've talked to a lot of composers, and you probably hear this a lot. Comedy is harder than anything.
Everybody says that.
It's the hardest thing to do. But here's why. When people say, write me some comedy music, what's comedic in music? Weird Al takes a song and changes the lyrics to something silly, right?
Parody or spoof. Yeah.
Parody or spoof. Or I'm going to take a heavy metal song and put it on accordion. So it's all taking something that is begun as something serious,
right,
twisting it, and going, haha, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
To me, that's not anywhere near as funny as letting the music be like The Straight Man. So Leo escapes, and that's a serious, escape cue. It's a spy movie escape cue. It feels like a parody because Leo's moving 1 inch at a time on the wall, and it's going to take him an hour to get out that window, but he thinks he's sprinting. And he also thinks this is the most important thing that's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, so the music is what's in his head, essentially.
Exactly, and it's not comedy music.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is like, it feels comedic because of the contrast with what's happening in the story. Like, in other words, Leo's the funny bit.
Right.
I'm not the funny bit.
Yeah.
And I think mostly that's what's going on with the music. There's a few times when it's the opposite, where you just, every once in a while there's low-hanging fruit that we can't resist. Yeah. We always called it the torture montage. It's like 10 seconds long, but they're showing what happened to the class pets when the kids were like
I mean, we
not
have
taking good care
Smigel
of
and
them.
Sandler. Like, you're gonna get some on the nose goofiness and absolute silliness. Like,
Yeah, there's even a Groucho Marx stinger on one thing where Squirtle breaks the fourth wall, looks at the camera, does the cigar bit, and it's but that's it's gonna happen if Rob Smigel's around. He's
yeah. So I mean, like, talk about, because I mean, you mentioned the two Robs and
yeah,
Dave, and of course, I grew up the same way. You know, Smigel
yeah,
and Triumph on Conan,
yeah,
and of course SNL, all the stuff they did in SNL. I'm curious, like, what was it like working with three directors, and who were you
yeah,
reporting to at any given time?
right. Well, and in a way four because Adam also
Yeah, Adam was involved,
producing.
very
So
involved. Yeah.
so on a like a kind of a day to day, I think we probably zoomed with the three directors, Rob, and David,
Hmm.
once or twice a week. And then when we'd reach some sort of critical mass, when we were all kind of happy with whatever we were ready to, then we'd pull Adam in because Adam was on tour, and so
Yeah.
he'd zoom in from a hotel room, or he'd have to review things however he could. So we tried to make it as easy as we could, and Adam's process is like, first off, he's making a lot of movies and he's on tour, and so it's more like, let's get it in front of him when we are ready to use his time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas the animators have much more kind of a detail-oriented process. They would
Yeah.
rather, let's try these little things, make a lot of little tweaks, and kind of fine-tune things. And especially someone like Rob Smigel, I mean, he's a professional comedian.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like he knows when it's funny, and it really is all about timing.
Yeah.
And it's not just frames. It's like every little beat of the music has got to be in the exact right place,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to land a joke. And so all that kind of detail work would be done. Then we'd show it to Adam, and it really was like, if he laughs, the joke works.
Yeah.
If he doesn't laugh, what's wrong? Let's fix it.
He was like your focus group.
Right, exactly. It
Yeah.
was great. It was actually really great, and he's a joy to work with, and they all are actually.
Yeah.
But there's some part of the joy is in the detail, because it's like, it's another thing about animation. You're never stuck with the performance that you got on set.
Yeah.
You never have to cut around this or that. You know what I mean? If there's a mistake in the footage, you just make new footage.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
You just go back to the drawing board.
Right, exactly. It doesn't
Literally.
I know there was a lot of that where it's like, how far in should we be on Leo on the wall?
Yeah.
That kind of detail work was always in flux. What color should Squirtle's pee be?
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
If the joke's funnier if it's more viscous. Can we get it more viscous? I mean, I'm not making this up.
No, I mean,
these are the conversations.
I work in animation. I know those conversations. Yeah.
So, and it's actually really fun. It
Yeah.
took me back to Rango in a way where it was
Yeah.
just as detailed, and like, I don't know. I think it takes a particular type of person to be able to handle that type of detail and not find it
Yeah.
irritating or boring or something. Like whenever Gore would get into the woods on something, or any of these, I would go, oh, maybe he's right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And if you're not leaning into that with interest, I don't see how you can work with on a movie like this.
Yeah.
So, and it is funny because, like, yeah, you mentioned Conan O'Brien and Rob Smigel and Triumph, and I was an early adopter of the Conan O'Brien show, like a
Me
season
too.
one
Yeah.
viewer.
I feel like a lot of like people who didn't really go with Jay Leno or the kind of the more traditional humor, which I still love Jay, but like but the more offbeat, just crazy,
Right.
zany. Let's see how silly we can actually be.
Yes,
Yeah.
it really spoke to me. It also happened to coincide with me being, living in a dormitory in college and getting my first television, which we didn't have laptops back then.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal.
You had to wait up till 12:30 to
You
see
had to
him.
wait up. Well, yeah, but you're in college. You're up
Yeah.
anyways. And I have such fond memories of just sitting there watching Conan O'Brien with Jen, who's now married to.
Yeah.
Watching Triumph come out and some of the characters, and oh my God, I don't know. It still kind of gives me little tingles that I'm
Yeah.
like working with the people that and even before that, it was SNL
I
when I was in
know.
high school. It was when Adam was in the cast and Rob was writing and
Yeah.
and Marianetti and Wachenheim were doing the animation.
I know because they're
Like,
doing, and they started their own animation company, and that's what Leo was
yes.
produced with. Like, yeah, because they did Ambitiously Gay Duo, which is probably not good for TV these days, but like a TV Funhouse, all
But
these
they
other
did
things.
it.
But it's still hilarious.
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious. It was never offensive or anything. But and to see them pull together and make something like Leo, and your score, I think, is such a huge part of it.
Thank
And you
you.
mentioned the kind of those first, I mean, the kind of pitch that you made for it. But when you started writing for the film, do you remember the
Yeah.
first scene that you worked on?
Oh, let's see.
And what was the inspiration for those first notes? I always like to like where did the first
Yeah.
where did you gravitate towards to? Was it just a storyboard that you really maybe an expression in Leo's face? Like what kind of pulled that first note out of you?
Right, right. Well, okay, so the first thing really was that escape sequence, although it's not that music anymore, but when it was written to the storyboards,
Yeah.
even back in the demo phase, it was like this sequence, just like you're saying, it's absurdist comedy, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the gag is Leo's going to escape. He thinks he's sprinting out the window, and you see the clock, and you see him get out, and the music kicks in, and it's like, okay, here we go, and then the next thing you know, there's a long shot and you see Leo and he's moving about this fast on the wall, and then cut back to the clock and it's been 22 minutes. And and I think like that is so funny. And
Yeah.
plus he has such an optimism, like it is a look on his face. He gets closer to that window and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
make it. I'm
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to make it, because he's trying to escape and live his life in the Everglades.
Right.
And we're so with him, right? So I just think, I don't know, I'm inspired by that in the same, like, that same, this speaks to me. What's the right word for it? Like unearned optimism.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
Yeah.
Where he's like, he does not have any reason to think this is going well.
Right.
Right. It's very SpongeBob. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, and that's another, childhood dream of mine. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I love, well, actually it was an adulthood dream. SpongeBob came later, but it's like, that's a character that I like for the exact same reason. It doesn't matter. He can lose a limb and he's just like, all right, let's
Yeah,
go.
he just is overly optimistic no matter
Right.
what. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And Leo isn't always overly optimistic.
Yeah.
He just has to be motivated to
Right,
get out the
right,
window or
yeah.
whatever it is. And
'Cause
I-
he's 74-year-old, like he's a curmudgeon, he's supposed to be like kind of old and
but
Adam.
he's like, I'm finally gonna live, and I love that. I just love that moment. So that was a way in. Then on the flip side of it, Ms. Malkin, which is the substitute teacher, the closest thing we have to a villain. In
Yeah,
this movie, who turns out not to actually be a villain. I like that character because it's so easy to get the point of view of the kids.
Yeah.
Because her intro is perfect. She opens the door, but the door's creaking open.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's going to be a monster movie or something.
Right.
And it's played without music deliberately because it's like the kids are going, oh God, like they're holding their breath. And she comes in and she's as awful as they imagined, and maybe even
Yeah.
worse. Like she puts brass knuckles on the table. She takes out a cage with a dead animal that's been, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is just the worst substitute, the worst thing that could possibly happen to a class of fifth graders. And that's the doom. And, so she ended up with a musical motif. I hesitate to call it a theme, although I guess it is. It's used that way.
Yeah.
Which follows her around in the movie, where it's like, it's weighty. It's
Announces her presence.
exactly,
Like, yeah.
kind of in a way like Jaws does or
Yeah,
something. But
yeah.
it's not necessarily threatening. It's just more. It's almost like threatening boredom.
Yeah.
like what that teacher is when
Yeah.
it's like they get out the 600-page history book and they start talking about borders in World War II and how they
Yeah.
changed every day. It's like, okay, this is not what a fifth grader wants to be thinking about. And so,
Right.
so it's almost, how do we play oppressive boredom? What does that sound like musically? And not make it, like I was talking about earlier, not make it comedy music, not make
Right.
it totally a gag. It's more like, how do we enhance this character with
Yeah.
this?
So when you were kind of like creating your sound palette for Leo? Like, were there certain instruments that you wanted to go towards, or certain instruments you want to stay away from? That were too goofy or too comical that would maybe distract? Like, I'm curious.
It's
like,
funny you use that word goofy, because that was one of the words when Adam didn't like something, he'd say it's too goofy.
wow, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's like don't goof.
Yeah.
Right? And that was a really interesting thing, because it also means different things to different people. Because
Right.
we did frantic oompa music, which to me might be goofy, but it's in the movie. So in that moment it plays. But instruments, let me just think. There was something about, especially starting with The Escape, that brought me to that like kind of 60s and 70s heist movie thing, and I immediately thought saxophones and
Just
baritone
jazzy,
guitars,
kind of,
exactly.
Lalo type stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And that and like I'll go there whenever I can.
Yeah.
So maybe it was just an excuse, but it was the right thing. That's what made it sort of Mission Impossible-y, but without being, you know what I mean?
Without being
that
too
is,
on the nose. Yeah. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
That is the gag. And so it started there, and then you get led into vibraphones. Obviously, there's going to be an orchestra. We're going to have plucky things, guitars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the world is so colorful and so it really absorbs whatever you put on it.
Right.
And then we end up in the Everglades, which are very jungly in our movie. So the music's very jungly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's something to that, where there's like I always love those 60s exotica records.
Yeah.
Esquivel and Martin Denny and Les Baxter and all of those albums that are, because they're not, how do I put it? They're not authentic. They're like there'll be is it called Forbidden Island? And it'll be what we think a Forbidden Island might sound like,
It's
right?
genuine but not authentic. It's like genuine from the
It's
artistic,
genuine but
like,
not authentic.
Yeah, from the storyteller's perspective,
right?
the musician's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And that was what I always liked, because there's these
Yeah.
very interesting choices of like instruments you don't normally hear, very carefully recorded, very
Right.
carefully arranged, but at the end of the day, it's built on kind of a strange idea, right?
Yeah.
That to me was how the Everglades are in this movie. It's like, to Leo, he's never been there. He doesn't know what it actually looks like. He doesn't know what it's really going to be like when he gets there. He has a dream. And so there's this kind of like imprint, like a kind of an imprint of what he thinks the Everglades are going to be.
Yeah.
That's what the music is. And it reminds me of, I don't know why I thought of it, but in Team America, when they show Paris, there's like, I feel like we've talked about this before, I don't know, but I always remember this. There's like the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre and the pavement is made, and it's actually the stones are little croissants, and it's like, this has nothing to do with like the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre are not next to each other,
Right.
and the Arc de Triomphe is not right next to
Yeah.
But it is in the movie, because it's like, this is what we have, like this bizarre idea, if we've never been to Paris, that this is what
Yeah,
it's
there's a
actually
baguette, there's a mime, it's just like
mime. Exactly. It's exactly that.
And I'm sure Harry's score had like some very kind of, French sounding like
I bet.
don't
But
remember this.
that's what it reminded me of a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
it's the Everglades, but it's not really the Everglades. This
Right.
is what he thinks it is. And so I gave him this sort of, and of course, by the time he gets there, there's all the party animals that have been released from Jada's party, and they've sort of set up like almost like a Lord of the Flies community out there, but a happy one still. And it gets absurd. It gets as absurd as a Conan O'Brien.
Absolutely.
Simpsons script.
But I mean, were those review, like when you were reviewing everything with the director? I mean, those must fun like presentation, to just like see what works, and the conversations of how to make it work and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing that always gets reiterated every time I do anything with music is subtle is difficult.
Yeah.
And what's the opposite of subtle? Obvious.
Just
overt.
like bombastic or whatever.
Yeah, much easier.
Grandiose.
So, like all of the action cues, there's a lot of version ones of action music. But then if you go back to looking at the stuff in the classroom, or just even tiny flashback cues, or little connections with Leo and Eli, for instance, there was a lot of iterating, and not just generated by the directors and Adam, but by me, by going like, well, hang on a second.
Right.
Maybe it's a pacing thing. Maybe there's so much you can try that can make it better, and it has such a cumulative effect too. So
Yeah.
it's like you can watch the movie and go, well, the last time when we got to, whatever, such and such kid's house, it felt more warm than it did before, but that music didn't change, and that's because something changed earlier. And
Yeah.
now we have contrast issue, and it really is interesting, and I love that kind of architectural.
Yeah, I mean that's the story because action. I feel like it's funny. I always remember when Hans did some interview when Inception came out, and everyone's like, raving about the Bombassa track, and he was like, I wrote that in one night. Like that was like the easy one,
Right.
And then everything else was the hardest part.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like,
surprise me.
yeah. So it's like, so I'm curious. Was there any on the whole film? Was there like a sequence that you really gravitated toward that you look back on and that's like a personal favorite of yours? And there's one that's like maybe a very challenging sequence that you had to really tackle that really kind of took extra thought and extra like process to get it done.
Let's see. Favorites for me. I loved Eli and Leo bonding. That's Eli's the drone kid.
Yeah.
He gets he's like literally helicopter parenting. I love that gag. The drone is hovering over him even in class. Like it combs his hair in between test questions. By the time Leo kind of convinces him to break up with the drone, which leads to one of the greatest songs in the movie, the Dear Drone Letter.
Yeah.
Then they go outside and play, and they have their little connection. And Eli goes outside without his safety suit and everything. It's a big day for him.
Yeah.
And it was just such a sweet and innocent moment. Actually, brought me to the kind of Timothy Green space where it's like, well, there's a difference between naive and genuine, right? And it can be both, but genuine is the key. That's the thing.
And you do that. I think you do that so well because I think Timothy Green was so. It's a beautiful score, and same with Christopher Robin. I think there's like very kind of the cousins in terms of like tone and stuff like that. Yeah.
And I think that's always going to be a part of what some of the things that I do because. How do I put it? I actually have a pretty high tolerance for like sentimental, nostalgic
Me too.
music.
Like some people are like, "Oh, this is too schmaltzy or too like melodramatic." And I'm like, I'm syruping on, pour it like I'm a pancake stack,
Right, but at the same time, I'm somehow able to do it in a way where I typically don't cross the line.
Where it works for everybody. Someone who might be like, "Oh, this is really too much for me," whereas someone who's like ready to just give themselves up to this movie and just like.
That's what it is. It's a kind of like a commitment to what the movie is telling you it wants to be, and that scene is not comedic. It's really beautiful and genuine. Okay, Eli made a friend. It's a lizard, but in this world, this is this is what you do, and it's it's taking it seriously. That's really what it is. So that's one. I guess it stands out. Challenges. I mean. Maybe it's just me, but everything's challenging. I feel like if I am like Hans. Every once in a while, I do write a cue in one night, and the action stuff went down pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I don't find writing music ever to be that easy.
Yeah, so we're talking about sentimental music and high tolerance for it. So I'm curious for you.
Yeah.
Because I remember what I grew up with in terms of animation. I'm just rubbing again. Whoops. I grew up. One of my favorite films was Land Before Time with James Horner's score, and that was very heavily sentimental, but also very real and dark. So I'm curious, and he just laid it on hard. So I'm curious, what did you grow up listening to that do you remember anything that left an imprint for you that was overly sentimental?
More recent, you say Casper, you say James Horner, and I think of Casper, which is I just love that score. But actually that came into my life later. Yeah. Growing up, Willy Wonka was my first. I still look back at that and it kind of point to it as like one of the main reasons I became a composer.
That's amazing.
Pure Imagination, forget it.
Yeah.
It's a great song. But it actually does that thing because I'm not sure that it reads as sentimental. I guess that's what it is.
At the end, I think it is, but like, it was funny because with the new one coming out, a lot of people were kind of talking about the original, and I always forget that crew of filmmakers was just like, there were documentary filmmakers. They had never done anything like that before, all these British and it was just like, so because the way it's shot though, and you look at the sets are just like they're beautiful on camera, but they were just piecing things together. They had no experience. They're just it's just a very low budget kind of way of doing it, and it worked. And that's why there's that crazy, riverboat sequence where it's
Yeah.
just like, what? And it's like, yeah.
We're leaving that in. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's like to me, those they're so elegantly written. It's like
Yeah.
we're going into like Henry Mancini territory almost, where it's
Yeah.
like, it's so elegantly written that it's undeniably beautiful and right.
But it's
And
big and romantic and yeah.
and it kind of somehow doesn't cross the line to being too
Yeah.
much, not for me anyway. And so that's something, the kind of music that I grew up listening to. I mean, there's also the obvious. I was a Star Wars kid. I was an
Yeah.
Indiana Jones kid. I was a Back to the Future kid. So those, like the big ones, those are also touchstones for me. But I guess just because we're talking about this kind of music, it's Willy Wonka. Stand by Me as a film kind of works in the
Yeah.
similar way.
And that breaks me every time I watch it.
man,
Like,
I just watched it recently, and it's still so good.
I did. Like, last year I watched it when the 4K came out. I bought it, and I was like, oh, that's just
Right? Did you go through all 17 of The Land Before Times?
No.
Okay, because I heard at the end it catches up to time.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
There's Littlefoot.
It's the land
finally,
at time.
No, the asteroid hit. So they ended like the dinosaur.
Is that really what happens? That would be amazing.
Well, that's how they end the dinosaur TV series, the Jim Henson one. You remember? That's how it ends, with them all dying.
Fantastic.
That was the series finale.
Courage, man. I'm telling you, Henson was darker than people think.
Oh, no,
It's
I
not
mean-
just the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, Dark Crystal, but Labyrinth, and other stuff too. But yeah, I mean, I love that kind of when you just go all in on the emotions and it works. You can, if it doesn't, and that's where the tricky part comes. It has to work with the picture. It has to work with the characters, because if there's a disconnect anywhere, then it becomes, so I'm curious with Leo, was there, you always talked about finding the line and going over it and coming back. When it came to spotting the film, where was it obvious where music needed to be and where you shouldn't? Because I know sometimes the animation, it's like, let's go wall to wall. Let's make as much music as you can. So when was it, like you mentioned, I think in one scene that, just for that scene, we had to pull the music back because it worked that way. So I'm curious, was there any other obvious places where like, let's pull it back?
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that was sort of less difficult than other movies, now that you mention it. It was sort of, I don't know why it is, but it was almost sort of obvious where the music should be. I never tried any music over the door opening when Malcolm came in, because it was just like, no, that works. And we all knew it worked.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there really weren't spots where we had a cue but didn't use it. I really am trying to think if that ever happened. I mean, little tiny interstitials that I added that I felt needed to be there that they kept.
Yeah.
That happened in a few spots, but we didn't really have a formal spotting session either. It was really more like, here's a movie, just start going. And I don't think there was ever like a rolling conversation about should we have music here or there. I don't know why, but maybe in animation it is a little more obvious. It's almost preordained because
they've already probably worked through a lot of stuff getting to that point.
And it's all designed a certain way. Like, if you film, if you do a live action movie, then things change and evolve and end up being a little different, and then the edit changes things and all that. With animation, it's all happening concurrently. So by the time it comes to me, the scene's pretty well designed.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it, because even this other movie I scored this year called 10 Lives, animated, no spotting challenges. Rango, no spotting challenges. I mean, I've done, I don't know.
Well, they probably are
More than
editing
a dozen
to
at this
a lot of probably temp music just to get the
Yeah, there
structure and
was.
stuff. Yeah.
But also, and that doesn't always inform what's in the movie,
Sure.
but it often informs where it comes in and out. And,
Yeah.
and we definitely sat, with versions of cues going, well, should it stop 3 frames earlier? Should it linger? Should the tail be longer? Those things were all worked on. But just kind of, I don't know, organically, I guess, as the piece was written, and not to conform it to some early idea or something in the temp, but more just now that we're here, maybe this can blur out. And there's even, because it's animation and we have there's a wipe in one part, that the wipe actually mutes the music. There's not even a tail, it's just a cut,
Yeah.
And that worked actually well. It was kind of more of a visual thing,
Right.
snapping out of a flashback or something. But
Wow.
wouldn't often do that in live action unless you're aiming to make it feel like it's animated. It's
Yeah, yeah.
interesting.
I mean, you mentioned live action. I know you hear the how difficult it is with picture
Yeah,
changes and stuff like that, especially with action movies and stuff
yeah.
like that. And with animation, once you got to the lock picture, was there a lot of changes with Leo, or is it just pretty?
No.
It's pretty set, right?
It's pretty sad.
Yeah,
It very much so, actually. And there were things like in because the action sequences at the end, like on with the bus and everything, those were animated last, and so
yeah,
there used to be more cutbacks of Malkin kind of falls out of the bus. She almost gets hit by a stop sign, and there
hmm
used to be more cutbacks, and it was like, oh, now that we have it, we don't need so much of that. So that's short. But I mean, I'm talking about one trim. If it's a Pirates movie, that trim
yeah,
happens every day
yeah.
across every scene.
Right.
You're just
Yeah.
scrambling pretty much to
Because
keep
we
up with
just
it.
finished a movie at Cartoon Network, the Craig Before the Creek movie, and I remember we're submitting our submissions for like the Annie Awards and stuff like that, and you always have to put the storyboard next to kind of the final picture
Yeah,
for editing and stuff for those categories. And I'm watching kind of how I love taking the storyboard and watching it next to the final because it's so pretty much close to what it
yes.
is. There's a few little changes every now and then that doesn't sync up properly, but like because you have to make it kind of sync up to submit it to
Oh
the
yeah,
thing, so
okay, sure.
you're kind of letting a scene, adding a few frames to let it like catch up and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
but that all happens in the animation process. And once you get to
right,
that work print or lock picture,
right.
it's pretty. Yeah, I think it's pretty
Yeah,
sad.
it's
Yeah,
it's interesting because I can watch a movie as storyboards and get it, but there were a lot of very detailed things that I didn't know were going to be in the final
yeah,
animation for Leo. So it was actually such a treat to just, oh, we got new reels. What's new?
yeah, yeah,
And finding, little visual gags that don't read as in when it's still frames or 1 frame per
right.
second or whatever the storyboard is, but read really well, you know, every time Squirtle pees, every time, the drone bursting through the window was a much bigger event when it was animated. When it's a
Yeah,
storyboard, it's just outside, inside,
right. Yeah, yeah,
so I couldn't have scored it properly without seeing the animation. It's a really fascinating process, but you're right though, the timing, I mean, the movie is probably within 1 minute or 2 minutes
yeah.
what it was when I watched it as storyboards. It's
Wow.
really
Yeah,
pretty much on rails. Yeah,
yeah.
it's cool.
Well, I mean, you did such a fantastic job with Leo. The film is. I mean, everyone loves it, and
Yeah.
the entire team, and the fact that the whole SNL crew got back together and you got to be part of that. That's just so awesome.
Yes, and I even talked to Smigel, and he's like, "This is the first thing that I've done that everyone agrees is good." I can see why Triumph might be, or the ambiguously gay duo
Yeah,
cartoons might be offensive to some people. This one, not so much. And you're right, we crossed 100 million views on Netflix
yeah,
now just a week ago, and it's still going strong.
yeah.
People have really responded, and a lot of it is the songs
Yeah,
that
it's the songs.
Rob
Yeah.
wrote, people connecting to, but it's just such a great, I don't know, it was really fun to
Yeah, that's
be a
awesome.
part of
And
it.
yeah, so I mean, you also mentioned so you have another animated film,
Yeah,
and that's
it's
premiering at Sundance.
premiering at Sundance. Yeah,
So, which is happening as we speak, or
about a
this week,
week.
yeah, or
Yeah,
in about a week, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, talk to us about this.
sure.
Yeah,
So that's a movie called 10 Lives, and that it's actually fascinatingly different type of animation in
mm,
that it's a story about a cat who cats obviously have 9 lives.
yeah,
He wastes his ninth life. He's a very spoiled, self-centered cat. Dies, kind of gets a special deal up in heaven that he can come back
mm,
for 9 more lives, but doesn't know that, didn't read the fine print, he will come back as a different animal for each life. So sometimes he's a roach, sometimes he's, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
And he's really actually trying to come back and help his mother, who's a human, to protect, well, she's researching the cures for like a bee virus,
yeah,
and there's an evil corporation involved that is, working against her research. And so he comes back in the guise of 9 different animals to try to prevent the evil corporation from, blocking her essential research.
yeah,
That's the heart of the story. But it's very much a we love our pets movie. It's a cute, fuzzy animal
yeah,
movie in that sense. And it's really a beautiful picture about how, I mean, I have a cat,
yeah. I have 2 cats, yeah,
and it's like,
and they always
and we
get
know how we
killed
love
in the
them.
movies as a joke, which is always I always
No,
I
I
know, but not in
know.
this one. But I'm just in general, and I think it
Well,
was always one of my biggest tropes where it was just like The dog, if it dies, it's tragedy. If the cat
Yes.
dies, it's comedy. It's
Yes, I remember watching Apocalypse Now in my high school class, and it's the exact same thing. There's a lot of people getting killed in that movie, but then at some point the dog is discovered on the
Yeah.
boat, and the whole class melts.
I mean, there's a site called "Does the Dog Die?" Like, there's literally there is.
So you can avoid the
So
movie.
you can avoid it if you don't want to see the dog die. But if the cat dies,
The dog dies in Secret Window.
yeah.
I have a dog die in one of my movies. There's probably
Spoiler.
more. Well, the cat dies in my movie, but it's a little bit like South Park, where you die every episode.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You come back.
But ultimately it's a love story for
Yes.
our pets, you know, and how they can sort of love us back, and if only they could talk or
Right.
become fish, you know.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. And let's see.
What was it like working on something like that? That's going to, smaller, going to
Yeah.
Sundance versus Leo, which is a Netflix production with Adam Sandler behind it, and like
Different. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
was comparing contrast. Did you have shorter window to work with? Did you have less?
It
enough,
was.
Yeah. More
it was.
constraints and stuff like that. I'm sure, like with budget and everything.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit more linear of like in that the music isn't stylistically moving around as much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's acoustic, it's very organic string on orchestra ensemble, but not a huge one. And when we made it, it was just an independent animated film. We didn't know we were going to get into Sundance. We just were making a nice movie, beautiful movie. But the schedule was quite a bit shorter. I mean, just to put it into numbers, I probably worked on Leo 7 or 8 months.
Wow.
6, 7, 8 months. It was a long stretch.
Yeah.
And 10 Lives was probably 10 weeks.
Oof, wow.
Maybe 12.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a little concurrent moment where I had like a rig in my hotel room when I was recording Leo and going home and working with 10 Lives. Home, going to the hotel,
Yeah.
putting on the headphones. So, but it was different. It was different because we weren't like with Leo. It was like, okay, I have this idea now we need a big band for these 3 cues. Okay, let's go hire a big band and For 10 Lives, it was much more focused. The score is much more, it's not a musical. There's a couple song things, but it's more carried by the score, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's unashamed to be beautiful, the music, I mean. It's
Yeah.
kind of going back to what we talk about.
Yeah, just being unapologetically sentimental. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's, I think, I mean, there sometimes is this trend in film music or certain writers that, and I do it too for certain movies, I should be clear, where the score wants to be more ambiguous or transparent, not committed to an emotion necessarily, so the audience can bring themselves to it or feel it, right? 10 Lives isn't necessarily that movie. I think it's more like we know what the audience is going to feel. It's not so ambiguous.
Right. Give me your hand. We're going to take you on a journey.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so here we are doing we're sort of we're going to just cradle the audience in whatever the emotion is. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's the exact same reaction when you watch a cute cat video on your phone.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's incredibly tragic because we might be about to experience grief, right? So the music can do all of that, but I'm not so worried about committing. I'm happy to commit to it when I can. Plenty of examples of other scores I've done where that's not the right approach, but in this case.
Well, I think I've always been a fan of that approach. I hate when people say it's like, oh, the music is too manipulative, and I was like, but I'm signing up for this. When I watch a movie, I like to be kind of like, if I want to cry, I want to cry. Like, make me cry. Like, go for it. Like,
I mean, do you hear my friend Mark Ronson wins his thing for I Am Ken, and he said, this is the space for boys to cry in this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's pretty genius.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I do. It's the same exact thing, I'll say it straight to the camera. We're looking for a reason to cry, so it's okay if we're willing to give it, right?
Yeah.
So and I get it. If I'm not in the mood for that, I'm not going to go to that movie, right?
Yeah. And everybody is, and no one's at the same emotional state at any given point. So
no, I know. And you say the word manipulative, but I'm like, as soon as you put a camera on a tea kettle, it's manipulative.
Right.
You're saying something.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Everything is you're trying to evoke an emotion. You're trying to evoke a feel, from the lighting to the framing to the music.
The flower pot in the background.
Yeah, the costume does everything.
I mean, look at all these props.
Yeah. we're trying to manipulate the audience that you're in a studio.
but it's true. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, I'm not. I don't always get that. I mean, I do understand there are lines that sometimes when they get
Sure,
crossed.
but I think that's when there's
Yeah.
like something's not in sync. Like it's not the picture. Either, maybe there's behind the scenes drama we don't know about, where the director and the not talking or not doing something, and then you just feel something's off, or
Right.
where maybe the performance is not connecting with the music. But when it clicks and everything works,
It's legitimacy.
yeah.
When it's legitimate.
Yeah.
When it's legitimate, you buy it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And then 10 Lives is a legitimate love story to our pets. That's what it is. And it's beautiful. And you know, and there's more to it than that, but it's quite fun, and it ends with some big climaxes, and you know, it's a really fun journey. But it's different in that it's not like, it's not outrageously funny in the way that Leo is designed. It's actually more funny in the way that it's much more down to earth funny. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's definitely comedy. But it's nice, and it's kind of got a British sensibility to it. It's set in England, and some of the, you know, the villain, there actually is a villain in this movie. It's basically an over-the-top Bond bad guy, and so we get to really, you know, lay into that. And funny enough, the baritone guitar appears in both of these movies now that I think about it, but very different role.
Right. Yeah.
And this one is, you know, sort of playing that spoof, you know. So you hear that guitar and you hear the, you know, that kind of language of music that says 60s Bond villain. So I don't know what it is about me in the 60s right now, but
You're just channeling that part, which I love it. I mean, it's in your voice, and I love it. Yeah.
yeah, it is in my. That's true.
Yeah,
it is in my.
it's
Because I don't know exactly. You know, exactly. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to just do pastiche, but I do think it's, you know, it informs.
No, I mean, we're all just sponges. We're as storytellers. You look back at what inspired you, and everyone's looking. I mean, it's impossible not to be influenced by stuff you love. Like it's just
right.
Like, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, and I love animation, and I love stories that have emotion, and you know, I'm happy to just be a part of them. You know.
Yeah. From lizards to kitties to
lizards to kitties. Sometimes he's a roach.
Yeah, sometimes a roach. And but yeah, so I mean, it's going to Sundance to find a distributor, or does it have a distributor yet?
Well, I think they have a worldwide distributor, but not U.S.
Okay.
You know what? I'm not sure if I know exactly everything's going. They do have distribution outside the U.S. I do know that.
Yeah.
But we're premiering there.
Okay, awesome. Well, I hope we get to see it in theaters soon. Yeah.
I think you will.
Yeah.
I think you will.
Well, moving on, I want to also touch on Star Citizen, which you've been a part of, and so for quite a while, and I think the entire community has also been like, you know, going on this journey too. So give us the recent updates.
It's so funny. I actually don't remember. Maybe it was 9 years ago.
It's been a while.
When I started. And for fans of the game know it's sort of two halves. There's the multiplayer game, which is playable, and that's what everyone's playing now, that I'm not writing the music for. That Pedro Camacho does a great job of that.
Yeah.
So all of his work is out in the world, and all of the 9 years of work that I've done, which is for Squadron 42, which is our the single player
the campaign,
aspect, is, you know, I literally cannot wait for this to come out because it's kind of building up, and I'm still writing. You know, last year we had CitizenCon last year. I mean, a game that's not out has a convention and fills the LA Convention Center for 2 days.
Yeah,
is sort of extraordinary. And I went because I knew that we were secretly going to premiere some footage from Squadron 42, and Chris Roberts, who's the developer, announced, you know, at the event that the game is now feature complete and we're in the polish stage, which does not take 1 week, by the way. We're not coming out tomorrow,
right?
But it means the game's playable from top to bottom, which means that we, you know, now we're still writing the score that still needs to be written, some of it, and we've still got to record it because that'll happen at the end, and you know, it's incredible what he's doing. And you know, people saw some footage of this game come out, and you know, it's one thing I love about gamers, and I am one, like I'm a gamer with Atari joystick roots, I mean? Is we're passionate people about the games we want to play.
Absolutely.
And this game has a very passionate fan base, and they loved it. You know, it was like, finally we're seeing what it actually looks like. We're seeing what Mark Hamill, Gillian Anderson, Gary Oldman, Henry Cavill in a game.
Yeah.
You know, in-engine rendered scenes, and I'm telling you, the scope of this story is, I don't think has ever been attempted in video games ever.
Yeah.
The size of what we're actually doing, and just the kind of the technology that's advanced in the 9 years to even make it possible.
I
Like, I
know.
think Chris kind of had to wait for the technology to catch up
And
to
I'm
his
sure he's
vision.
consistently having to go back and change things as the technology
I
is
mean,
getting better.
yeah,
And yeah.
because I've even seen some of the cinematics, in stages from those 9 years,
Yeah.
and you can they released some of it. You can look at them, kind of the progression to
Yeah.
where it is now, and it's absolutely incredible. Oh, they showed some of it at
Yeah.
CitizenCon. Now that I think of it, but in any case, by the looks of it, we're going to be around 10 to 16 hours of music for the game.
Wow.
Right? All scored, all layered out. There's a lot of cinematics, which is part of telling the story, but it's seamless going into and out of
Sure. Yeah.
gameplay. There's no load screens in the game. It's pretty incredible what they're able to do. And I'm not allowed to speak much to the story
Sure.
other than to say, it's absolutely astonishing how
Yeah.
deep and varied all the locations are, and where we're going, and places that are not in the persistent universe yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very, very excited.
I think we, I
about
mean,
Sonic.
yeah, it's funny
We
'cause
probably talked about it in every one of our interviews.
seriously, like when we, I think our first interview, we were like, oh, I'm doing the Star Citizen.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, it's well, let me put it this way: it'll be worth waiting for. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, people are already playing, have been for many years. Playing
yes, yeah, which is a very, because the game world is such a different beast than filmmaking, and and it is under the microscope now with all these mergers and to
We're
crunch.
still independent, actually.
Yeah, I know it's with you guys. You're still independent, which is
Yeah.
great, because we've seen games come out where they deceive kind of the players, and the whole base gets so angry. Whether it was like Cyberpunk or
Yeah.
that recent. That one was a crazy one. That was the days before something. It was kind of like a Last of Us kind of
Okay.
inspired, and it was promising to be this big MMORPG, and they had this test footage that everyone's like, this looks amazing, and they
Yeah.
released the game, and it was the most uncooked, like half-baked thing, and they literally were like, all right, refunds for everybody. They erased themselves from the internet. Developer took down all their handles, shut down, and laid everybody off and just closed down. I was like, wow, I've never seen that before. Like,
Right.
and
It's astonishing.
I'm just like
right?
thinking about the people who worked on this thing for that many
I
years, and
know.
it's like yes, the game base is angry, but like the people who work on this are passionate too.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's a strange world for that. With and it happens in films too. We see them get, work gets done, and then the movie never comes out, and that's a drag. And I'm not immune to that either. It's happened to me.
All of us. Yeah.
But that, I guess, what I respect about what Chris is doing with Squadron is, well, just simply not allowing that to happen.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
if someone said if there was some reason why he was forced to release this game 3 years ago, no one will be as happy as when we release the game when it's ready.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of a no-brainer, but he has the ability to stick to that because we're independent but well-funded.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So that's the thing, and he's
the fans. I mean, because he's done Kickstarters and he's raised funds, and
It's all
and
crowdfunded.
all crowdfunded. So it's like it is a almost like a community project that everyone's kind
Yes.
of part of, and that's amazing that he does the con, like to have fans come in and
it's a way
check
to
in on the
interact.
update. Yeah, just to keep them updated, keep them with new stuff, and of course giving them out, the multiplayer and everything. So it's like, and people forget that 10 years seems like a long time, but like a Rockstar game or a Bethesda game, that takes about the same development cycle, 7 to 10 years.
Right, you
usually.
just don't get to play it along the way.
Right.
And they don't just
It's just
decide
behind
to
closed
create
doors.
a multiplayer
Yeah.
game on the side. Yeah, exactly. It's true, and you
Yeah.
don't hear about it until the last 2 years when it gets announced.
Exactly.
And even then, there's examples of it not going well. Chris isn't going to let it not go well. And that's the end of the. That's really the whole point. And you can see it from his sort of track record of the Wing Commander games were in their time equally innovative, and that's what he's making. So, I predict big things for this game.
Yeah,
I really do.
I mean, it's already it's just a big conversation. Yeah. So, and who knows? Because now that Hollywood is looking at games,
right?
Star Citizen the film could be coming.
Well, I mean, you know what? That's where I met Chris, though, because he directed Outlander. Sorry, excuse me, he produced Outlander.
Yeah.
Adam McCain directed it. But that's how I met Chris. And so I met him as a filmmaker, although. Like I said, I'm a gamer. I knew him as a game designer. I remember going like, oh my God, that's the same Chris Roberts, right? Like, I'm about to meet, like, boy, I get to meet some of my heroes, don't I? And Outlander was just a whole different beast, but you can tell, even looking at Wing Commander, that he thinks of video gaming or video game design in a slightly different way.
Thanks for the update, because we were still,
Of course.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
I know.
amazing.
Yeah, we'll still wait a little longer.
Yeah, we don't want to rush. Yeah, what's that? I can't wait to dive in, because I'm a gamer too, and I can't wait.
Yeah,
to
you'll dig
yeah.
it. You'll dig it.
Well, to kind of wrap up our conversation, I usually start with this question, but I think it's good. We've talked so much; it's good to finish it, because and I think in the past I've always asked you kind of. I like to get a little philosophical about your job and your life and stuff. So take this question. It's a very simple question, but you can take it you can take it at face value. You can find deeper meaning behind it. But Geoff Zanelli, what does music mean to you?
Oh, wow. I thought of 11 or 12 different answers and having trouble committing. It's both a way out and a way in, if that makes sense. It was a way out of a life that I saw ahead of me that I didn't want, and a way into I guess getting to share with the world the things that I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Leo,
Yeah.
Star Citizen, 10 Lives, Mark Hamill, Rob Smigel. You know what I mean? It was a way into like people I never thought I'd get to ever have a conversation with.
Yeah.
That are so inspiring. And the older I get, the more I sort of realize the it was a way out part was pretty important to me.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that I couldn't have been happy, doing taxes in another timeline, or eat laundry and taxes in it. You know what I mean? There's something beautiful about that too. But it's pretty exciting what I get to do, right?
Yeah.
And it's not lost on me that it's unique.
Yeah.
My father's deaf. He couldn't do it. He couldn't hear.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's wrapped up in it's such a gift, actually. I think just to even be able to hear music, the fact I actually get to do it is even more. I don't know. You said philosophical, but you got pretentious. I'm sorry.
No,
don't
get pretentious. I love it. I want to talk about art again, because I feel like when everyone says art, people are like, oh, it's too pretentious.
It's getting so lost.
But it's like we lost it. It became so consumer centric and so and the way our industry is going. I think we need to talk about that more. We need to talk about why humans want to do this for a living.
100%. And because I'm hearing words like content and product, and and I've even caught myself using them and going, oh,
because that's how we work in the studio system. That's how they describe it.
It's not great. No. And it's like a whole, it's not at all the reason.
Yeah.
No, you're so right. And we haven't, not that I want to talk about it, but there's this whole AI conversation,
sure,
royalties conversation,
the business side of it,
and blah, blah, blah. And it's all like noise in the way of what we're actually trying to do, which is literally, we're having a conversation, but when I write music, I'm having that conversation with the 100 million viewers who watched Leo. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't know what the royalties are going to be.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I certainly didn't know when I wrote it. I thought maybe 10 people will watch this, not 100 million. So, it's so the wrong approach in some of it. And it really, I guess, just to be honest, you kind of touched a nerve when you said that a little. It frustrates me a little to see, there was the streaming bubble.
Which that burst,
yeah. And I get that, but what it did, with the good thing that it did, was that it meant that there were so many things that you could now write music for, that a lot of new people got to come into the fold.
Right.
That's great.
And there was so much new storytelling and new different storytelling, and it wasn't just the same revenge story or rom-com,
Right. Yeah. But the problem is that it also was still sometimes the same one. And so that's where the issue is. And I think it generated a period that I don't think we're going to look at so fondly if we take it as a whole the great things that were made during that bubble will remain great, and they'll be the things we remember. Like any decade of filmmaking, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
We remember the ones that were great, and occasionally we can go back and find a gem. And I think that's what we're going to see here too. You know, and
audiences will always, I think, pull out the ones that stand the test of time. I look back at the 60s and 70s and have my favorite films. I don't know what the politics of the studios were back then, or the deals going on, and
how much they got paid.
Exactly, because I was growing up in Maryland, I didn't know any of that stuff. I was finding stuff in film school, and I'm like, oh, this is cool.
But Rosemary's Baby is great. And Images is a great movie. Exactly.
I grew up on Leone westerns and like stuff. It's just like I'm sure there was so much drama and crazy crap going on all the time throughout film history.
I'll bet.
But and I know this is a seismic shift, and we're living it, so it feels so significant because we're in it. But I'm hopeful for the future. I think.
Oh, I'm too. I'm very much an optimist.
Yes.
But I'm also weathering a certain type of storm.
Sure.
We all are.
Yeah.
But I'm very much an optimist. In fact, like that, this is a little outside the scope of what we're talking about, but there's been all this talk about royalty rates and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I'm the last remaining optimist. Because I remember when cable was being born, and all of a sudden there were 200 channels, and everyone is going, why are the royalties so low? And then 5 years later, people are making a living doing it.
Yes.
So it's just like, I've seen this already.
Yeah.
I know what this is.
Yeah, I mean, streaming will become cable. Give it time to figure itself out.
Good.
Yeah, just need to work out the kinks.
Yeah, and then and now all of the streamers are doing the right thing and saying, let's make less, better movies.
Yes.
Right, or shows or whatever.
Quality over quantity, essentially.
And that's going to be a good thing too.
Yes.
So it's all going to be fine,
yeah.
guys.
The budgets, hopefully the budgets come down. We get that middle class of movies back again, the mid-budget range.
I lived in there for a while.
It's great. I love just a good $80 million movie. It doesn't need to make $300 million and make $1 billion to be successful. So, and we'll see. I think video games will be the next frontier. I think we've seen some great adaptations for film.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, for film. Yeah, but video games itself also has always been the best. I mean,
right.
Storytelling, it's the most successful genre from like film and TV and music combined in terms of like gross and everything, and people being in it. But I think Hollywood now looking at video games again in a better light versus you grew up with these like kind of knockoff like adaptations when they didn't care about it, but now people care about it and the fans care about it, and
different.
I think storytellers are taking it seriously this time.
They totally are, and don't neglect what the writers of the actual video games are like too.
Yes.
They're listen to what they have is so interesting stuff.
To craft something like that spans
Baldur's Gate, how do you do it?
Oh yeah.
I don't know how you write that.
It's insane.
Because it's 1,000 stories and each player is only going to play 10 of them.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
It's crazy.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Anyway. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for your time. It was so great to dive back into your world and be back here in your studio, and
It's great to see you again. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.